Hello, so I've been asked to expand 1 minus 2x to the power of negative a half, and I've been asked to find the first three terms in ascending powers of x. And I've just been given the validity at the end. All that validity means is whatever this x is in here, okay, I take the positive version of that, so that's what the modulus sign means, okay, and that has to be, whatever that comes out as, that has to be less than a half if I want my expansion to work and for this thing to give a good approximation. Okay, now, if you remember, we looked at binomial expansions way back in C2, where we had like some number plus another number raised to some power. And the thing is, we found the expansion of that if that power up there was a positive whole number, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc, etc. Now what we can do, because we're in C4, we can look at the case when the power is a negative number or when it's a fraction, okay? And in order to do that, we have to put our thing which we want to expand in the form of 1 plus something to our power. Okay, so this is the crucial form. We need to put it as 1 plus something. And when we expand that out, it's just going to be 1 plus n times our something, so our power times our something inside, our y in here, plus n times n minus 1 over the 2 factorial times y squared. Okay, and then plus n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 over 3 factorial times y cubed, okay, and then because n is no longer a positive whole number, it's a fraction or it's a negative number, it means that that expansion is going to go on forever and ever and ever. So I'm just going to represent that by 3 dots, and it's going to carry on with the same pattern. So the next one will be n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 times n minus 3 over 4 factorial, and then y to the power of 4, okay, and you basically get the idea. But we've been asked to find the first 3 terms. So if the first 3 terms, well, that's our first term, that's our second term, that's our third term. I don't actually need to go as far as the term in y cubed. Okay, so that's what I'm interested in looking at. Now, don't worry if you can't get this formula into your head, because it is in the formula booklet. I don't actually think it's that hard a formula to remember, because it's quite a nice pattern actually. Nothing unexpected in there, but it is in the formula booklet. But a word of warning, the formula in the formula booklet has an x here instead of a y. Now, I use a y personally because you'll always get given expansion. You usually get given asked to expand something with an x already in there. And I find that people just tend to get confused because, if you've got an x here, then you've got a negative 2x here. So like x is negative 2x, and it just gets confusing. So I just say, look, just call it something completely different. So just call it y, okay? And then clearly here, so if I just write this out again, so I've got 1 minus 2x to the power of negative a half. Okay, it's really easy to read off what is what, because my n is just my power, so my n is just my negative a half now, so n is just negative a half. Okay, what's my y? Well, my y, be careful here, my expansion is in terms of 1 plus something, okay, and inside here I've got a 1 minus something, but that's not a big deal, because 1 minus something is the same as 1 plus the negative of my something. So it's the same as 1 plus negative 2x. So 1 minus 2x is the same as 1 plus negative 2x. Does that make sense? Okay, so my y is basically minus or negative 2x. So y is negative 2x. Okay, and then it's just a case of plugging those two things into my formula up here. Okay, word of warning, a couple of things I'm going to point out here. Number one, don't try and be too clever. Don't try and simplify as you go along. First step is just literally write it down. So when you see an n, write negative a half, and when you see a y, write negative 2x. Don't try and expand it out, don't try and square it, don't try and times things together. Just literally write it down. That's your first step. Then you can try and simplify it in your next step. Second thing as well is make sure you use brackets. So particularly when you've got things like this going on, which is n times n minus 1, okay, make sure you're putting them in brackets. So let's just write it down. So I've got 1, okay, so 1 plus n, which is my negative a half. I'm going to stick that in bracket so I don't kind of lose that negative somewhere, okay, times y. Well, my y is negative 2x, okay. Then I've got plus n times n minus 1, so I've got n, which is negative a half, okay, times n minus 1. Well, what is negative a half minus 1? That's going to be negative 1.5 or negative 3 over 2. You happy? Now, if you're not sure about that, remember you've got a calculator. Okay, and that's still over 2 factorial times y, okay, well, I'm going to stick my y in a bracket, so my y is negative 2x to the power of 2. Okay, and that should be all I need to find, because that gives me my first 3 terms. Now, my next step is then I'm going to simplify. So I've got 1, I can't do anything with that, plus negative a half times negative 2x. Well, it's a negative times a negative. Get your signs sorted first. Negative times a negative is a positive, okay, so I know it's going to be positive. Then I've got half times 2x, because I've sorted the negatives now. So a half times 2x, well, a half of 2 is 1, so I'm just going to be left with x. Okay, then I've got plus, I've got negative a half times negative 3 over 2. So I've got a negative times a negative. That bit in there is going to make a positive. So it's going to be a half times 3 over 2, which is 3 over 4, over 2 factorial. Well, 2 factorial is just 2 times 1, so that's just 2. So I've got that over 2, okay, times by negative 2x squared. Now, a negative squared is going to become a positive, because a negative times a negative, that's a positive. So I'm happy it's a positive, okay, and then it's going to be 2 squared, x squared. So it's going to become 4x squared. Okay, now it's just going to finish off tidying this up. So remember, this 3 over 4 literally just means, I'm just going to rewrite it quickly, divided by 2. So 3 over 4 divided by 2. 3 over 4 over 2 is the same as 3 over 4 divided by 2. So when I divide, okay, I multiply by half. So dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by half. Okay, if you weren't sure about that, you could stick the 2 over 1 and then flip it as if it was a fraction ordinarily. So, okay, have I got any kind of simplifications I can make? Well, yes, because look, I've got a 4 there and I've got a 4 there, so they cancel, okay? So then I'm left with 1 plus x, haven't changed the first two terms. Then I've got 3 times 1 over 2, so that's 3 over 2 times x squared, okay? And that is the expansion for the first three terms in ascending power of x of 1 minus 2x to the power of negative a half. And if you weren't sure about the validity, kind of where this modulus of x is less than negative a half kind of comes from, then all it is this expansion here, up here, this kind of expansion up here, is only valid as long as the y, modulus of it, has got to be less than 1. Okay, so here now, my y is negative 2x, so negative 2x modulus has got to be less than 1. Well, what is the modulus of a negative? Are you happy it's just going to be the positive version of it? So modulus of 2x, okay? And then I just divide through by 2, okay? So I've got the modulus of x is less than a half. So that's where that comes from. Easy enough.